Okay, today we have the amazing Anna Fernandez. She's the family law attorney for Miami, one of the top attorneys in Miami with her company, Legal Lotus. And she's going to talk today to us about what a family law attorney does in the divorce process, the work that she does with her clients, how she helps them, how we as a divorce coach can work with a family law attorney and make the process easier for everybody involved, the mistakes to avoid from her perspective, the advice, the things that she will encourage you to do as a divorce coach, and what are the best ways to connect the client with a family law attorney. So Anna, thank you so much for being here today. And could you please go ahead and tell us everything about what an amazing work you family law attorneys do?
Hey, Olga, it's always a pleasure. Thank you so much for setting this up and for having me. It's really, really my pleasure. I love talking about this, what I do. I have a passion for it. I know that you do too. So it's always great when we connect with each other. So I guess just like a brief background, my name is Anna Fernandez. I practice primarily in Miami, but now it's throughout Florida, which is great. And I help families that are going through changes in their family dynamics. And it's primarily divorces. We do have some cases that have to do with time sharing or issues involving children between parents that were never married, which that would be called a paternity action. But you do see a lot of the similar issues in between those type of cases because they deal with children. However, paternity cases have nothing to do with assets and liabilities. So that's when divorces get a little bit more complicated. And that's why it's great to work together with divorce coaches and mediators and other professionals who kind of help and put it all together and help finalize the process.
Which is what we were talking before we started recording. We were talking about how moving forward, I personally believe that the new paradigm of divorce, which is what we're teaching you, will be the holistic divorce, where it's not clients come and work with one professional as it used to be, which will tend to be the divorce coach, the divorce lawyer, but that they work with a team. Are you seeing that in your field right now?
Oh, absolutely. And I'm implementing it as well. There's so many careers now that have to do with either like trying to help people emotionally and also coaching, and now having access to people through things like Zoom and that sort of thing. Everything is virtual, so it makes it a lot easier. It brings a lot more people to the table. And honestly, it's great on my end, just because a lot of the work that I wouldn't necessarily qualify as work, it could be better handled by a professional like yourself who's trained on how to do and handle the emotional or like some people call it the bedside manners portion of the job, because it is part of the job. But working together with people like yourself helps ease the process, because it keeps people on track and holds people accountable, of course. And you're really dealing with a professional that is trained to do this. They don't teach you this in law school. So it's something that is, if I could refer it to a professional and it's going to help my client better than I would myself, then it's going to be referred to that professional. Now, I guess not the conflict or the hurdle that you face, but yeah, kind of like the issues that you face is, how do you actually get a good one? How do you get a good divorce coach? How do you get a good mediator? And that really comes with time and with working together. So, and I know that you're amazing. So I'm happy that we connected.
Thank you. How would you suggest that divorce coaches consult with their clients when they come to them before they've talked to a family law attorney? How would you recommend that they approach the family law attorney to pick the one that is right for them?
So if a client or a potential client is talking to you or to one of your divorce coaches, first and foremost, as you know, divorce coaches cannot give legal advice. So it really depends on the question. If they're asking for a referral to an attorney, then that's when networking and contacts, that's when it comes into play, because you want to make sure that you're going to help this person, right? And you're going to help them in your own way. But if you're going to refer them to somebody, you want to make sure that the person you're referring them to is somebody that is of quality, that is going to take care of them, that is going to hold their hand. And if they can't, for whatever reason, let's say they have a trial and they can't take on new clients, or for whatever reason, that person has the network to be able to refer them to another attorney that will give them a quality service. So you really want to set up at least a few names of attorneys that you either know or that are within your network. And if you don't know any, it's very simple to just pick up the phone or kind of look online and join a meeting, join a club, join something that will give you access to other attorneys. Because if you're like-minded, it's going to be great, because again, if you're in this industry because you want to help people, and if you find an attorney that wants to do the same, then even if they can't help them for whatever reason, they're still going to look for somebody. They'll have a list of their own people. Hey, I have a list. I can't do it this time, but I have a list of other people, or I have a conflict, so I can't do it. I have a list of other attorneys that are like-minded and will be more than happy to help you with that. So reach out to other attorneys, and grow your network. It's very important.
Which is something that I recommend when people come to me from areas that I do not have a contact, because what you were saying is essential. Create your referral network where you've already seen Anna, you interact with her for an hour in this Zoom call, and then you'll decide like, oh, I like the way that she expresses herself. I like her patience. So yeah, I think that she will be a good one to refer clients with. You can always get directly in touch with whoever you think that will be a good potential lawyer to refer to. But if it's in an area, like I recently had someone from Kansas, and I was like, I don't know anyone in Kansas. And I said to her, look, we're going to do this together. You go and search for them. I'll search for them. And for me, one of the best ways to go is obviously the internet. No more yellow pages these days. And it's literally like go on Instagram and go on YouTube and just enter those family law attorney in your area. And in your case, for example, you have a really good YouTube channel where you can already start seeing how they act, how they explain their processes. Because to me, one of the most important things with a family law attorney is that they are going to explain terms in the most basic way. Because you guys are like knowledge insanely deep, but our people are so emotionally almost unstable. Like they can't really understand the information that's coming to them. So we really need someone who is going to slow down, use terms that they can understand, and make sure that they get there. So some of the red flags that I will say when interviewing family law attorneys is that are they patient? Do they mind if you have to repeat the question and they can give you different ways of explaining it? Is there anything else that with working with other family lawyers that you will say, yeah, this may not be a good thing, or look for these other attributes?
Well, you want to see if every single state has what's called a bar, and they're a board of, some are attorneys, some are not attorneys, but it's a board or panel and a board that they pretty much regulate practices, and they keep you on check. So if anything happens and somebody files a complaint, I need to report that to the bar. And since I'm practicing in Florida, I'm regulated by the Florida bar. If I'm practicing in New York, I'll be regulated by the New York bar. So one of or I guess a piece of advice that I love to offer is you want to make sure that when you're dealing with an attorney, do a little bit of a background check. It's not that difficult. Like you can probably Google Anna Fernandez, Florida bar, and my profile will come out. In the profile, it will tell you if I have received any reprimands. So if you want to make sure that the attorney is legit, and of course there's sometimes that somebody is reprimanded, but it happened 10 years ago or 8 years ago, and then you could reconsider. But if it's something that's recently happening, or it just happened a few months ago, or it happened last year, and of course it depends on how severe that reprimand was. Some people get disbarred. You want to make sure they're licensed and they're in good standing. But you could also check by just Googling the name of the attorney and their state bar, like New York bar, and their profile will come out, and it will let you know if they have any discipline history. And that is also something that I've actually Googled opposing counsels before, when it's like, this person is kind of strange. They're not really responding to any of my emails, and it's been 2 weeks. And I'll Google, and it's like, okay, yeah, they're not really careful with their cases. They've been reprimanded before for dropping the ball. You you are your own, you're also like, you're establishing your own network. So you want to make sure the people that are on your team are credible and also not going to drop the ball. People make mistakes, but when it's something that is severe enough to be called before the board of, of the regulation of the Florida bar, for example, then, that's something worth looking into. They do also have the reasons why that person was reprimanded. So if it was like there was an issue with their employee, that their employee did something incorrect, then that's something that you may not want to put it against the attorney per se. And I'm sure they learned their lesson. But if it's something like, oh, this attorney mishandled a client's money, or this attorney failed to respond to deadlines, that's something you want to be cautious of, because it does happen. So I would offer that as advice. In addition to everything else, and it's Google reviews also tell you a lot. Of course, you sometimes have either ex-clients or people that never hired you, and they'll sometimes write a review because they were upset. But if it's a consistent 1-star, then you want to make sure that all your bases are covered, and maybe reach out to that attorney for one. There's a lot of attorneys too, so you want to go with one that, like you said, Olga, is patient, also has knowledge of what they're doing, experience, and that comes with years of practice, of course. And then also connections. You want an attorney that's also connected, that, because like I said, if there's a conflict of interest, or if they physically cannot take on cases and it happens, you want them to actually send you in the right direction. And most of us can. So, because we deal with opposing counsels in almost every case. So, and the good ones, I keep a note, I'm friends with, I call them when I have a question. And that's also something you may want to look into as well. Finding an attorney that you're on that relationship level where you could literally either shoot them an email or send them a call and say, hey, I have a question. I know I can't give legal advice, but I have a personal question, or my client has a question. Can I connect you guys? Like, that sort of thing.
Yeah. And that's a question that when my clients are interviewing their prospective family law attorneys, I always ask them to question with the possible family lawyer if they will be happy if they need to bring mediators, financial advisors specialized in divorce, divorce coaches, because I've seen in the past, there's this misconception that people think that you only create a team if you're working with collaborative lawyers. But right, do you want to go ahead? Right?
Yeah, that's not, especially like, for example, I'm working on a case right now that I have a trial on Friday, and I have to work with an accountant because there's just so many things that are going on in the finances. And collaborative law, that's more of when it's either uncontested or there's certain issues that it's you guys can work together, but that's not always the case. So you want to make sure you have your own independent CPA. You don't want to be using the same accountant that the other side is using when you're not even sure if they're telling you the truth. So it's you need to find good professionals, and it's not just in the legal industry. It's also, accountants, it's therapists, it's coaches, it's, I get people ask me all the time, do you know a good nanny? Like, it's, because a lot of people going through divorces are like, I don't know how to handle it. And like, my spouse used to take care of the child, so it's little things like that. But again, that goes back to, I guess, trying to build like a very good foundation and a good network. It's very important.
Yeah. And making sure that you're creating that relationship, because this lawyer is going to be an integral part of your divorce and of your life for whatever amount of time. So you really need to feel comfortable. I know that there are boundaries that need to be established. And I always say, please respect those boundaries from the lawyer's perspective. But you also have to feel the confidence that you can share with them, like, hey, I would like to bring another expert. Are you going to be okay with that? And they're not going to be offended. They're not going to be like, no, that's my expertise. So that you can work with them.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So in your ideal world, what will be the areas that you would like as a family lawyer to focus on with your clients, and that you would like to refer other areas to other professionals? What it is that you're like, this is what I'm best at. Can we just send me that?
Well, I love uncontested divorces because that that's more of like my emotional side, because I really like when everyone walks away happy. So I guess my strong point on that is I'm very good at contracts. So if you can get a contract that's acceptable for both people, you could technically help them both, and just by using one attorney. Of course, there's several things that go into that, but just very broad and generally speaking, I love doing contracts, and most contracts or settlement agreements, parenting plans, all of these things are necessary. If you have a child, you're going to need a parenting plan. That's kind of like a contract, because if two people are going to agree to it, then that's great. It's a contract. If not, you go to trial. So I don't mind trial work, but it's very time consuming. I do a lot of trial work, but that's when I seek out professionals. I'll seek out an accountant. I'll seek out a divorce coach. I'll seek out, I always recommend either get a coach or also in combination with a therapist, because, you know, I guess going back, I was not necessarily trained. I do have a psychology bachelor's degree, but I'm not trained in, hey, you know, these are the emotions that people are going through. Of course, I have experience with it, but at the end of the day, there's a certain way, like our lawyers' minds are programmed a certain way, and we're looking at it logically, and we're not necessarily looking at it emotionally. And a lot of times, especially when you're going through a divorce, you're emotionally driven. Your actions are driven by emotion. So when a client asks me a specific question that has nothing to do with the law, just they want to talk about it, and I, you know, I give them my ear, I have no problem. But my response isn't always, it's not, I always try to be as empathetic as I can, but it may not necessarily be as emotional, because I'm thinking logically. And it's easy for me to say, well, no, you can't do XYZ because it's going to jeopardize this. It's kind of like a whole process of like getting the person in the right mindset to actually receive this information and use this information, because sometimes if you're not ready to hear something, it's going to go over your head. And it's it's very important to work together with other professionals when you're in the trial atmosphere or when there's conflicts, because your clients are not always going to be thinking logically, and there's going to be a lot of emotions. And if you want to focus on the logical work, like the pleadings, the getting trial together, you need someone to help you with the emotional part of it. And that's where I believe that divorce coaches and therapists and several other professionals come into play. And that's when I typically, I don't want to say refer out, but I keep it within, but at the same time, it's more of like, we're working together to get through this. So that's yeah.
That's critical, because what you were saying about the emotional part of it, that you can do your best at dealing with it. But I always say lawyers are great at interpreting the law, but they may not be as good as interpreting your emotions. Okay. You may find someone like you that happens to have a psychology bachelor. Oh my God, that's amazing. But you may not, and you just don't want to mix those two things. So I always say, if you have really strong emotions that are running in the background of that divorce, yes, hand them over to someone else that can help you with that. Like, you will never be able to reach a settlement agreement when you have all that resentment, that anger, which there's going to be a portion of it that it's always going to be there, because come on, you're getting a divorce. It's not all going to be a bed of roses. But if it's the most important force running that divorce, no lawyer is going to be able to help them interpret that. And it's important that they're willing and open to say, hey, handle this in a different way. Another misconception that I have to clear up at the beginning of the working relationship is when people come to me and say, yeah, we have no issues. This is going to be a very easy divorce, so we don't need a lawyer, right? And I go, well, no, you do. And you want a lawyer because of what you were saying. Even if it's an uncontested divorce, you still want everything in a very nice packed contract, right? So what would you say to people who come to you and at the beginning they say, yeah, I don't think that I need your services, I'm just kind of checking it out. How do you tell them you really need the protection of a good contract?
Well, I first ask them if they have kids. And if they do, it's almost certain. I don't want to, well, yeah, it's more likely than not that you would need at least to speak with an attorney and hopefully try to draft something together, because when you're dealing with kids, child support comes into play. Even if there's 50-50, if one person is making more than the other, then the chances are that the person making more is going to have to pay something. Of course, there's things that could be worked out in an agreement, because you could say, hey, I'll let you claim the kids on the taxes every year, and that will make the difference. And even though I make a little bit more, we do 50-50, you claim them on, like, there's little negotiation tactics that you wouldn't otherwise know unless you've either done the process or you're a lawyer. So I first ask them, do you have kids? And almost always, if they have kids, I say, well, how are you going to split the time? Oh, we're going to do 50-50, or, oh, we're going to do XYZ. Okay, so then how are you going to do child support? Oh, well, I don't know. I guess, well, doesn't the statute have the number? No, it doesn't actually. It's a method. Like, you have to actually calculate, based on income and based on several other factors. So it's not as easy. And in order for you to understand that, you have to actually look through the statute. And a lot of people, they see a statute and they freak out because a lot of it is legalese, and you need people to kind of, like, if you want to do it yourself and have someone explain it to you, then it's going to be a lot more time and probably more expensive than just having an attorney do it, as far as like calculation goes. So I start off with kids, and then I ask, the second question is, are there any, let's say their answer is no, I have no kids. Okay, great. Are there any assets and liabilities? And if there are, then that's another area where you at least want to speak to an attorney, because let's say you agree how you're going to split all the properties. What happens if both of you guys are on the title? Do you know what to do? Like, what if there's a mortgage? You won't be able to give the title. It wouldn't be valid. The mortgage company wouldn't allow it. So then that type of language you would want to include in an agreement, because one person, for example, is going to keep the house, but both parties' names are on it. Then you're going to be a risk of liability if your spouse doesn't pay. So there is language that could protect you, and that's all comes in the agreement. So yeah, when they ask me questions like that, I just go down the list. Do you have kids? Is there a time sharing plan? Do you make a different amount of money? And then, of course, if there's assets and liabilities, how are you guys dividing that? And even cars is a big one, because a lot of the times, even if let's say it's a lease, you might need your other spouse to be a co-signer to qualify for an auto loan. And technically you cannot transfer that. Car's not going to be yours. You can't transfer the lease. So what are you going to do? Even if you're in an agreement and you think you don't need a lawyer, all of this language needs to be included in a way that that you're protected. And it's really, I would recommend at least speaking to an attorney on how to make that happen. So I guess to answer your question of, how I would address on whether, we don't need a lawyer, it's if you have any of those check marks on those questions, then I'd recommend at least seeking some sort of guide, even if it's a call-in, a check-in with an attorney to review the documents, because they don't necessarily have to represent you and submit a notice of appearance. They could just do a document review. And a lot of attorneys could do that for a very reasonable price.
Because that's another misconception. People think that you have to hire the lawyer for the whole process, and that, but there is another way, right?
Absolutely, yeah. No, there's some lawyers that will do a document review. And to be honest, if it's something like that, I would love that too, because it's something that you're helping people come to an agreement, and they're coming to the table with an open heart and open mind. And half of the time, maybe even more than half, when people are divorcing, that doesn't happen. They're resentful, they're upset. So that's why Uncontested is one of my favorites, just because they kind of like, hey, it's not going to happen, but we love each other. We love our kids. Maybe we don't love each other, but we know that it needs to be resolved in an amicable way. And those type of cases I love, because everyone walks away happy, really. But it's a collective issue, a collective effort from everybody.
How do you help those that come to you and say, yeah, I'm happy to negotiate and mediate the whole shebang, but my partner is awful? How would you help them bring the other person into an uncontested sort of collaborative type of approach?
So it's funny you ask that, because that's actually happened to me a few times. And I always ask, does that person have an attorney? Because if they do, I cannot talk to them. But if they don't, here's my cell phone number, or well, I don't do cell phone anymore. Here's my number. Here's my number. Have them call me. It's usually the man that doesn't want to like deal with the attorney, but you know, I've had it on both instances, no problem. But so if it's, for example, if it's someone where it's like, we already know how we're splitting up everything, we just need to do the agreement, but my spouse is, you know, he's afraid of the process. And of course, this is my client telling me this, because you can't really say my spouse is afraid, especially if it's a male, because then, you know, there's other emotions that come into that. But what typically happens is a lot of people don't like lawyers, or they're afraid of them, or they're just kind of like, oh, they're expensive, or oh, they just have a preconception of what an attorney is, especially a divorce one. So I just say, here's my number, have them call me. And usually after the first conversation, I'll get a text from my client saying, oh my gosh, you know, they just sent me a message, and oh my gosh, I'm so happy that you spoke to them, because they see that it's not like really what they thought it was going to be, that you're not like really seeking them. Because at the end of the day, these type of cases, they could be handled on a flat fee basis, because it's something that could be pretty much streamlined or can be managed, and I can predict how it's going to go. And I don't need to like think, oh, what if this person files this? It's going to take 10 hours to respond and to go to court. So I guess if your client's spouse is kind of on the fence and not too sure about, I can't do this collaborative thing, I would say have them call me. That's what I typically do. And if not, I have a backup list of attorneys that are good. And this all goes back to having your network, right? Yeah. I have a list of attorneys that I know that are good, and they can have that spouse call those attorneys and talk to them. And you'll see that it's what we're doing is actually really beneficial for both of you, because, for example, if you have children, the money that you would be spending on fighting over a minute issue that I think is minute, but you think that I'm saying that because I'm her lawyer, you'll talk to a lawyer and they'll explain to you the process. And then, you know, it's all about education too, because most of the times the people that don't want to do it in a collaborative effort, it's because they just don't know. And of course they won't, because if it's your first marriage, you've never gone through the process of a divorce. So, or you may have gone through a divorce and it was a terrible experience. And that's also a common theme that I've seen before. And, you know, that's why it's education is, you know, one thing. And then if they still don't want to speak to you, that's okay. Here's a list of people that can probably help you. And I do that a lot, actually, with a list. I do that a lot for prenups and postnups. I always have a list of other attorneys that will do it, like that we kind of work together to, if I'm representing one, they represent the other, and we just work together to make an agreement that's solid for both. So, which is another, that answers your question.
It's another very important clarification. Like you said, it's all about educating, and God bless us all. We have no idea what we're getting into, and we get most of our information from movies, which, by the way, I'm always like, when we see the movies, it's like ER. Then you go there and George Clooney is not your doctor, okay?
No.
With divorces, and they think that it's going to be like one evil lawyer talking to another evil lawyer, and you're in the middle, and it's like, there are cases like that. But that's probably like the 5% super high conflict. But yet we go in there going like, that's going to be my experience, right? Mm-hmm. And it's so important that we say, no, can be dealt with no lawyers, not my recommended option, but it could be. You don't have to show up in front of a judge most of the time. It could be one lawyer not representing both, but, you know, helping each other. Could just be that the contract, there's so many flavors in this ice cream shop, but yet we don't know it. We come into this just with that whole thing. Divorce is the worst time of my life. I'm going to be ruined, and it's going to be the most conflict ridden. And then we put them in touch with people like you, and then they go, okay, that wasn't such a bad experience. So I love that we're talking about all these clear misconceptions. Another huge one that people come, and again, I tell them, come and talk to my friend lawyer and she'll clarify this. But many, especially women that have been stay-at-home moms, come to me with the whole, I want to divorce so badly, but I can't because he's threatening me that he's not going to give me any money. He's going to make it really hard with the kids, blah, blah, blah. And I always say, well, that's going to be amazing if he pulls all that off, but the law is rarely going to be in that case. He's going to have to prove that, you know, you're incompetent, whatever. So what would you say to those people that come to you with that already preconceived wrongful idea?
Well, I usually, when that happens, it's someone that is emotional, because it's you're not just now separating from a relationship, you're also trying to plan your life. So you think that the world is going to end, because it's like, how am I going to be able to do this? And you know, it's really sad, because to have that in your head, that you rather be unhappy, but at least your kids are taken care of, or at least, like, you know, there's some financial aspects that, you know, if you get sick, you're going to be able to afford it, because, and I'll just stay with this person. That's really sad, because it's, you know, why would you want to stay with someone just because they were giving you financial security? And it's easy, of course, it's easy for me to say that, but at the end of the day, it's very hard to do, because when you're living, let's say, for example, 5, 10, 15 years with the same type of relationship where this person was financially, this person was a breadwinner and this person was taking care of the home, then it's what you're accustomed to. So getting outside of that comfort zone is very, very, very emotional. It's that is not easy. And someone like me, if I had a client that is, you know, comes to me with these concerns, it's easy for me to say, well, you know, the law protects you, of course. If you have kids, it's factored into the income, the time spent. If you were the main person that was taking care of the children, and now they're saying, well, I'm not going to let you see the kids, that's not going to happen. Because if you historically were the person taking care of the kids, making sure their homework is done, taking them to school, taking them to practice, this person is not going to necessarily know who the kid's best friend is, or when their soccer meets are, or how much you have to pay for lunch, or, you know, those type of things. So as long as you have time sharing with the child, and if the other parent was either making the payments or the majority of the payments, or the breadwinner, then child support is child support. It's going to be calculated based on the income, and you will have support with that no matter what. If that parent still wants to stay in the children's lives, if they don't, then, you know, that's a different story. But if you're in a marriage, it's a little bit different. So that's the one piece of advice. And then also, when you file a divorce, you have what's called, in Florida and in California and Hawaii and different states have similar, it's called the status quo. A status quo is like, for example, this person was paying my mortgage, my phone bill, my car payments, and my car insurance throughout the whole duration of the marriage. It doesn't matter how long it was. Let's call it 2 years of the marriage. This is what I was accustomed to. While the divorce is pending in front of the court, that person cannot stop making those payments. It's called the status quo. You can't just go from one day to the next, just like with children. If this parent was the one that was staying at home, making sure the homework was done, and you know, taking care of, pretty much managing the household, the other parent cannot just remove the child. Unless, obviously, if there's other circumstances, if there's a physical threat or an emotional threat to the child, that's different. But we're talking about just basic stuff where it does happen, where the other spouse tries to threaten to scare the other person, and it does happen often. Don't worry, because you have that status quo. They cannot shift. They can't just like change things for the kids either, even less, you know. And so you have the status quo, and then also, if there's always alimony that you could ask for, and or temporary support as well. So those are things that I do a lot. Those are things that it is more of a legal question, because there's certain things that come into play. How long were you guys married for? And that sort of thing. But if it's just filing for divorce, then you have that protection of the status quo, and you could always ask for more support in the form of child support by filing a motion for temporary support while the litigation is pending.
Mm-hmm. And in your opinion, from your personal experience, I do have a strong preference for as close to 50-50 when it comes to custody. But I know that most of my clients are very resistant to that. And then I know that some lawyers will be like, yeah, whatever you want, we'll fight for it. In your personal opinion, what do you think is the best approach when they're coming to you going like, this is what I want in custody, but what do you think is best?
Well, I always ask them why. And then if it's, oh, because, you know, you always have to know why. And the bottom line of what's driving them to want that. But so courts, yeah, I'm with you, Olga. The ideal situation is 50-50 because a child needs a mom and a dad, or a dad and they need two parents. Yes. That's just that's because you need to balance the amount of work between each other.
Yes.
And not go to a third party before doing that, because this is your immediate family member. It doesn't matter if it's mom, dad, mom, you know, dad. The two parents are the parents.
Yes.
If one parent cannot take care of the other one 50% of the time, well, then that's when it shifts to the other parent that can, before seeking outside help. So it's not like, for example, if you have somebody that was traditionally the person that was staying at home, let's call it like a traditional homemaker, stayed at home, did the homework, did the schoolwork, did extracurricular activities, you know, picked them up from school, all of that stuff. And then you have another parent that was working and is still working all the time. That other parent can say, well, I'll do 50-50, and then I'll just put the kids with a babysitter or in daycare half of the time that I'm at work. You have to afford the other parent. If that other parent has the ability to stay with the kids, then that parent should be with the kids, or those kids should be with the parent, because that's, you know, that's, if you're blessed to be able to be with, if you're a kid and you can be with mom or dad, you know, whatever the situation is, before being placed in a daycare center or something, then that is a gift and that should be honored. Yeah. Otherwise, it's, you know, you're putting money in someone else's pocket because you don't want to agree with the other parent. And that's not okay. So yes, I guess I agree with you 100%. It's not always doable because, you know, people take on different roles in a relationship. Some people work night shifts. Some people work early shifts. And how are you going to take the kids to school if you have to be at work at 5 a.m? It's not, it's very difficult. So it's important. That's why co-parenting is very important. Helping each other is very important. And if you can't do 50-50, it's easier if you realize how to make that decision on the onset than in fighting it. And that's when the emotions come in. If you're fighting it, it's because you're probably driven by something else, and you're not necessarily thinking logically.
Yeah.
So yeah.
And to wrap it up, I would like to go into, what do you see are the biggest mistakes that people do that then you have to come later and clean up? Or even once the divorce is all settled, they have the marital agreement, the parenting plans, and then it's like, yeah, they oversold these things. For example, what you were just saying, no, I want 50-50, but then it's like, well, you can't take care of the kids feel abandoned, blah, blah, blah. What are those mistakes that you wish that people will sit down, think about it, work with their divorce coach? Where are the places where we can foresee that there's going to be trouble and we want to save them that?
Well, there's a few, but sticking to time sharing, because that is a big one, because of course you want to be there for your kids. Maybe it's because you want to lower your child support, maybe for whatever reason, but let's say you want 50-50. And I've seen this happen before, and I've actually participated in an agreement. And then later on in a year, I get contacted and it's like, I can't continue doing this. And so it's time sharing. Is it feasible? If you're not living in the same state, don't overcommit yourself and say, I will have them every 3-day weekend. I will fly them to my states. I will pay for it and I will be there. Same with the summers. Oh, fine. I'm in a different state. I will have them the entire summer. You also have a life. So if things come up and you're not, how are you going to get the other parent to fly? It just becomes more expensive and it's not feasible. I mean, that's a big one that I see when the parents are not living in the same state. And one parent is saying, well, I want 50, I want a certain number of overnights and I could achieve this by having all of the holidays and all of the summer breaks and all of that. That's not always possible. And that's probably the biggest one I see. And luckily with anything involving a child, it's modifiable. Child support is modifiable. Time sharing is modifiable. So you can reopen the case and pretty much as support, these are the changes that happened, but then you have to prove what was the changes that you didn't know then that are happening now that would warrant a change in the schedule. And it's usually the parent that is like, hey, you're supposed to have them, this weekend, it's a 3-day weekend. You're supposed to have them. I have plans. Where are you? And they're like, oh no, I can't. And then it's like, then you have to recalculate child support. Then you have to kind of like, that parent is typically the one that goes back to court and reopens it and say, hey, this person promised that we're going to do X, Y, Z. They didn't comply. And now we need to change the agreement to be consistent with the status quo, because that's what's established stability for the minor children, which is the most important thing. And, and that's why it needs to be changed. So that's pretty much one of them. I've also had issues that people have overlooked. It has to do typically with when people have either a property together, a car, something that is being financed, a house, a boat, something that both people are on a title. And if it's being financed, then you can't really, bless you, you can't really give the title to the other person. It won't be a valid title if there's a mortgage or something is, it's being financed, if it's a lease. So if let's say, for example, you're the one that I give it to you, to the other spouse, you could have the house and I'll take, X, Y, Z. And that's how equitable distribution is done. You give and you take. So let's say, for example, you give them the title to the house. That's not done correctly because there's a mortgage on the property. That spouse's name is still on the title. There's a missed payment. Well, that's going to affect both spouses' credit. And that is a huge mistake, because you try to be nice and you say, fine, you could keep the house. But at the end of the day, if you cannot work it out and you don't have something in the agreement that says that this person is going to indemnify you and make sure that if you are, if you're going to be subject to something negative because I miss a payment, then there has to be something that would rectify that. And typically it's like an indemnity clause, but it's not going to fix your credit. And if you are not okay with that, then your only option really is to sell the house or have them refinance it. And a lot of people don't think about that. They just think that I'm just going to send you a title, but you're still on the mortgage. So that's another, and it all comes like you're trying to do a good deed and having, oh yeah, you could definitely keep the house and I'll keep this. But at the end of the day, you should have sold it, because now your credit is, and now the house is in foreclosure and your credit is messed up. And yeah, so that's pretty much the two that I've seen a lot. Or, sometimes people get advice from people that are not lawyers. Even if it's a paralegal, it's still not, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're 100% well-versed in what you're saying that you can do. And people sometimes they follow that advice and it's done incorrectly. And their case is either dismissed or it's not finalized or it's done incorrectly. And there's certain things that you could definitely modify, like we talked about child support and stuff like that, but there's other things that can't be modified. So you want to make sure that when you're making, especially when it's an agreement, you want to make sure that whatever decision you're doing is 100% informed and you're speaking to the right people. And let's say you're not 100% informed, at least you did your best to try to find what the best result for yourself would be. And the best way to start with that is by speaking with an attorney.
Yeah, absolutely. And the last question will be for people who are like, well, I don't know how much this is going to cost me. I don't know how long it's going to cost me. Obviously, it's not a one size fits all. There is not this is going to be a 12-week process, but roughly, so people, there are people that come to me, go like, I don't have hundreds of thousands of dollars for a lawyer because my friend had to go through that. And I said, well, let's just be an average of how much it takes for an uncontested divorce and a contested divorce.
So uncontested, if there's no kids, no property, and you want an attorney to do it, because there's other avenues, and we've talked about this before, where you can, kind of like do it yourself divorce. Yeah. That's obviously that's cheaper, but again, you want to at least be able to have access to an attorney, even if it's an hour of their time or 20 minutes of their time, to either review the documents or make sure that the method and the documents that you're using are correct. So typically, if we're talking about like actually using an attorney for an uncontested divorce, there's no property and there's no assets, or there's no liabilities, or let's say there is, but it's already been divided and there's no need for an agreement, or it's in my name, your name, like everything is like not, there's nothing that really has both of your names on it, or it's already taken care of, you already spoke to the bank, that type of thing, then I would say it's between $1,000 to $1,500. There is a filing fee that goes straight to the court. And I do this with all my clients if they qualify. If you qualify for indigent status, which means like, let's say, for example, the example that you gave, where one spouse was working the majority of the time and the other spouse was a stay-at-home mom, what happens then? I would have the stay-at-home mom be the one that would file for divorce, because she could show that she doesn't have any income, and they could waive the filing fee. Filing fee in Florida is $412. So, I mean, it's not like thousands and thousands, but $412 is a nice vacation, right? Like, or it's a nice staycation at a hotel, or, it's still money. So, and then the length of time for uncontested, I mean, I don't want to like say this because it doesn't always happen, but in Florida, I have a way to be able to, like, as soon as we have a case number, as soon as something is filed, I could streamline it, put it through the court system, and have an order signed whenever the judge gets to it. Sometimes it's within hours and sometimes it's a day or two, but no court time, not having to go to court, not even if it's a Zoom hearing. It's really just kind of, it's incredible. It's amazing. And people are very happy when that happens. Makes things a lot easier. But again, that's uncontested. Yeah. So if it's an uncontested that requires an agreement, which means there's property, it needs to be like, you guys need to talk about it, and there's not going to be, let's say you know how you guys are going to divide your time with the kids and the time or the properties and all of that, you just need it in writing, then it's a little bit more. Sometimes it's that one is also between $1,500 to $2,000, and it all depends, but it's not going to be more than $2,000 if you already have an idea of how everything is going to be divided, and it's just all a matter of putting it in a contract or an agreement. And then there's the contested divorces. Now those, it all depends, because if you can argue that the other party is making a lot more, like let's say there's a huge disparity of income, like let's say someone's a school teacher making between in the 30s to $40,000 a year, and then you have like somebody that's in banking or someone in a different profession that's making over $200,000 a year, then you have a very good argument that that person should pay for your attorney's fees. Most attorneys charge an hourly basis. I know in Florida, the norm is between $300, and then some could go all the way up to like $600. But yeah, that's like when it's a heavy litigated, and that attorney also specializes in numbers. So it's very, because that attorney could, you won't have to hire a CPA or an outside person if that attorney is also a CPA. And that is beneficial, but that's another thing that you have to resolve, or I'm sorry, it's another thing you have to think about, because if it's an attorney that's going to help you resolve the case within weeks or months, versus an attorney that doesn't necessarily have the connections or the ability to resolve things in weeks or a month, then you may want to weigh the options. But if it's a contested divorce, again, it depends on what is being contested. If it's a kid, if it has to do with kids, I would say it's going to be a minimum of $5,000. If it's something that has to do with like debt or money, I would try to argue, come on guys, let's go to mediation. Let's try to get this like nipped in the bud. Like, it's just money. Money comes and goes. And if we're talking about a lot of money and one spouse is like, I'm not going to give you anything, then you gotta choose your battles. But if it's something like that, it could be like between 3 to 5 starting, of course, at a minimum. Yeah. But that's why I try to work things out. It's a win-win. It really is. Lawyers are happy to do these cases, and it's because that's another misconception. Like a lot of people think like, oh, lawyers just want to do the hourly basis, or they just want to get paid. And you have no idea. I just want my clients to be happy, and and they really like. And that's why when they call me to complain about certain things, it's like I love to give you my ear, but I don't want to charge you for this. So it's we kind of have to have those boundaries. And that's why, I will seek outside help, and I'll reach out to people that do specialize in, helping people mentally go through the process. Yeah. And that's what, those are key players in contested divorces, or who's going to help you like actually get what you want legally, or, help you towards that direction. And then it's who's going to help you like grow as a person and emotionally and prepare yourself for the next chapter of your life. And it's usually a team effort. It's very difficult to have one person do all of those roles. Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm hoping that we're creating a whole structure now where we will be able to educate people, to help them handle the emotions of divorce. And we can also help them connect with the people who will deal with the legalities of divorce. So I always compare it to building a house. You don't expect the architect to be the one that's going to be putting down the plumbing. It's like you get the architect, you get the roofer, so let's just make sure that everybody puts their expertise in place. And like all the things that you said today, they are mind-blowing, the kind of knowledge that a lawyer will have that is not necessarily dealing with the emotions of an affair. But that's where Anna comes in with all the, okay, did you look at this contract? Did you look at this mortgage? And then I'll come with so he or she had an affair. Let's work on those emotions and move forward with life. So it's a team effort for sure. It takes a village to raise a child. It takes a village to get a divorce that you won't regret. So absolutely. So thank you so much, Anna. Once again, we'll put all your info. So all of you guys that will be working with people, if they're in the Florida area, Miami, your preference, but anywhere in Florida, Anna is the top Miami attorney for family law issues. And you're working on doing something online. So getting the process even more streamlined. So I'll just suggest that everybody just get in touch with Anna, and let's keep working together. You're such a jewel when it comes to one of the best models of family lawyers that I see out there. Olga, that means so much to me. Thank you so much. And of course, thank you for having me. I love our connection. I think you're amazing. And any way that I can help your people would be wonderful. I'm here to help. Thank you so much, darling. Thank you. Okay, we're going to finish this one. And you just stay on the line, please, Anna. But I'm going to end the recording.